Hey guys, welcome back to Working Aussies Homestead. We are out here in the garden. Technically, I'm on the patio, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this patch right behind me. So, this past weekend, Josh went and rented a tiller, and we used a tiller in our no-till market garden. Now, there's a big reason for this. Obviously, everything that we do, we put a lot of thought and research into before we make a decision like this. But I wanted to share why we used a tiller in our no-till garden. This was a question I had when I shared it onto our social media platforms, was why? But then also a few of you asking if we would share more on why we did that. So part of what we do here at Working Aussies Homestead is we focus a lot on soil health building, and really maximizing the ways that we can add organic matter back into our soil. So if you are new here, welcome. When we purchased our homestead, none of this was here. It was just a flat piece of monocrop grass that barely grew, is only about this tall, and a ranch style house. There was no buildings, there was no barn, there was no greenhouse, there was no gardens, nothing. It was just all flat grass, and we had these 21 bushes in the front of the house. That was it. Everything on our homestead we have added, and we have really tried to figure out, okay, what do we want to practice? What ethics do we want to have in place? And then with those ethics, what processes do we want to combine in order to achieve the goals we have here on our homestead? So the number one reason why we started our homestead was because 5 years ago I had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. From all of our research, the only thing that could really help, more than just taking a bunch of medications to manage symptoms, was changing diet and lifestyle. So at the time, we lived in an apartment up in Raleigh. We were walking distance from a grocery store. We ate out a lot. We just lived your normal, typical early to mid 20-year-old life. Moving on to our property that was super flat, we decided, all right, let's go ahead, let's start a garden. We used a sod cutter and took out 1,000 square feet of sod in front of the house. And we purchased our first egg layers and our first meat chickens. We did a batch of 50 meat birds the first year that we were here. Not even the first year. We purchased the house in August. We butchered the birds in December. We really got that all started. But the very first thing we did before we even put the garden in, before we even got any livestock, was a soil test. And you've heard me talk about our soil test here. You've heard Josh talk about the importance of soil testing. But that was the very first thing we did. We lacked a lot of nitrogen. We lacked a lot of potassium. And basically all of our numbers were just super low because this piece of property and the field surrounding it, so we're surrounded by a 9-acre field that is still conventionally farmed. This piece of property and the field itself has been in the same family for the last 200 years and farmed and treated the same way all those 200 years. So there's been no focus on building soil health. There's been no focus on adding organic matter, adding natural fertilizers. It's all been primarily synthetic and just different maintenance methods as it comes to the soil health and the property itself. So like the trees on the outskirts of our property have been cut using a tractor attachment rather than being pruned properly. So we have lost several of the trees that were pretty decent when we moved here because of that practice. And that was really why we added a fence 3 years ago, was because of the tractors actually coming on to our property line to cut those trees with the attachment. So anyways, that is a story for another day. But back to soil health. So with that knowledge that we lacked a lot of nitrogen, the first thing we added was meat birds and chickens, because what's chicken poop high in? nitrogen. So we decided, let's get some chickens, let's just start rotating them. So we built a mobile chicken tractor, we ordered some electric net fences for protection, and that's what we did. We started rotating our chickens around. The first winter that we were here, we actually kept the chickens in the garden space to add in that natural manure, to add in some good compost. We created compost using the pallets, and we actually had one of those sitting in the garden, and when we opened it, we let the chickens peck it apart. Our goals have always been to build up the soil health, to create better biodiversity in our soil as well as in our pastures. So we've done that through the addition of alfalfa meal and feather meal, and we've done that using fish manure and adding in wood chips, adding in organic compost that's super expensive but so worth it, and trying to, use just natural practices to just help increase the soil production so that we can get the most from our market garden here. So all of that to say, adding organic matter back into the soil is what increases your soil health. So this year, almost 5 years in, we did another soil test. All of our numbers were raised drastically. Now we still have a ways to go to get to like absolute perfect soil where we want to be, but all of our practices up into this point have been really beneficial to our soil in creating that soil health. We tilled this section over here because primarily of time, but I also want to point out that there are certain instances where tilling can be more beneficial to a certain section. So with tilling, we did not till dry, already barren land. We tilled in a section that had weeds, that had vegetables in it, that had all of that. So when we tilled, all we did was put that organic matter back into the soil. So that way, this fall and next year, that plot will be further along in abundance than what it was this year. Now, yes, this section produced a lot for us over this past year and a half that we have added that section to the garden. But I want to point out, that section had never been tilled before. Before we planted into it, we had tarped it, and it really did not grow grass well anyways, and so we had to add a lot of organic compost in order for it to produce anything at all. This year, the weeds went wild. It just kind of got out of hand, and we didn't really have enough time to tarp it for it to be ready for fall crops. So we made the decision to go ahead, rent a tiller, and till all of that in. Now, we do not plan to add a whole lot to it. Josh plans to just string it up because, the man likes his garden rows nice and straight. So he measures it out, he puts some stakes in the ground, and then he uses string and twine to make sure that the rows are nice and straight. Now, we're not going to add a whole lot of compost to it now, but we will add more wood chips into the walkways to just help suppress the weeds. But then, of course, being into that more organic matter has been laid in there, we're hoping that the weeds will stay at bay at least a little bit longer than they did this time. Our hope is that by tilling in that organic matter, we see greater yields of harvest from the produce that is planted there. Moving forward, we will never till that section again. And I want to share that it's okay to try different methods if what you're doing in the garden is not working. I encourage you to definitely research a lot of what you plan to do in the garden, what you hope to do with it, because odds are there's somebody out there doing it the way that you want to. Now, when we have tours, I like to just explain to people, we do a little bit of a lot. We take a little bit of this method and pull it in. We take a little bit of this method and pull it in. And so our property is kind of a little patchwork of different methods of growing, rotational grazing, animal husbandry, herbs, volunteer plants, like all of that all combined into kind of like a little modge podge of this is what works for us. It might not work for you. It might not work for you to till in organic matter. We have tried to do our due diligence in attempting various methods to kind of see, okay, this works for us, this doesn't work for us. So this year was a year of great experimentation. It will be again next year as well. So we used some landscape fabric for the first time this year. We used the cheap stuff off Amazon. Don't recommend that. It's okay, but I have weeds in my peppers still because we used the cheaper and they just grew right on through it. Now we did get some higher quality from our local country farm and home farm store up in Pittsburgh. If you are local, that is the best farm store to go to. Absolutely worth the drive, absolutely worth the little bit higher prices because they know what they're doing. They're super knowledgeable. They're there to help, but also their products are always top-notch quality. So we tried that as well. That worked really well for my flowers. We also did a different experiment using wheat straw this year in our walkways and as a natural mulch around our corn. And we also tried it around the squash, and it was working with the squash until we got a lot of excess rainfall, and then we got vine rot on all of our squash plants, so we lost the squash. Say that 6 times fast. Lost the squash, lost the squash, lost the squash. All that to say, it's all a learning opportunity. We're still learning what works best here on this property. We have had a lot of loss this year in terms of livestock, in terms of seed starts, in terms of produce in general. And it's just, it has been a year of pivoting. And if you are on social media, you know that I have already used the section from Friends where Ross is yelling, "Pivot! Pivot!" It's been a year of pivoting, for sure, on a number of levels. But I'm hopeful for this fall. We have not successfully had a fall garden, and we're just deciding, you know what, to just go ahead and plant. We've had a heck of a time with seeds starting in trays, so we're going to experiment. We're going to do a lot of direct sowing and just see if it works, because we've found that seeds that are direct sowed versus transplanted for us do not experience a stunt period. And it's also been really difficult for us to control the environment, the temperature, everything for seeds that we start in trays. Josh had started some fall seeds maybe a month or so ago, and they were doing good, looking great, and then something came in the greenhouse and ate all the tops. And it just, sometimes you just can't win. You just can't win with the garden, but you just keep pushing forward, keep trying, try again. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to try again. We're going to try this plot again for fall. We've got a lot of things we need to get in the ground. We have 600 garlic seeds from our own garlic this year that we're super excited to plant. When we harvested the garlic, Josh was calculating out how much we needed to plant 600 heads for the 2025 season, and it was pretty much all the garlic that we grew this year. So we kept it all, we processed it, we cured it, and now today we're going to go ahead and plant that. So I'm really excited to get that in the ground. We also are going to direct sow some carrots. We're going to direct sow some cabbages. Just see how it goes. Thank you so much for watching. If you took away anything from this conversation, it is go do a soil test. They're usually super cheap, if not free, through your local extension office. Most counties have one, and They're super easy to obtain, super easy to do, and it'll help get you on track for the next season. I wanted to share how we plan to continue helping with our soil health into next year. So we plan to still add in the natural fish poop fertilizer from our neighbor down the road. And Josh is super excited, but I'm super excited to add in here another fun addition that we have had for a little while, but this is the first time that you guys get to see them. And they were gifted to us from a dear friend turned family, because she has one of our puppies. But another great resource if you're looking for somebody to kind of help step you into the right direction with bees. But our dear friend Tara gifted us some worms. So she has been trying to push the Working Aussies Homestead worm farm here for a little while, and she finally convinced Josh when she offered him some worms. I'm going to add those clips in here. You can watch Josh set that tub up for the worms so that he can start collecting those castings. Now, if you're new to vermiculture is taking worm castings. So as worms grow, they leave behind lots of poop, and it's super nutritious for your plants, which is why when you have an area that has a lot of worms, usually you have better soil health. Imagine that. So taking those worm castings, the worm poop basically, and creating a tea with it is super beneficial as a fertilizer to your natural garden. So next year we plan to really implement adding in some worm casting tea along with the fish poop fertilizer from the neighbor. And hopefully we will see some great results with that as well. So they're again adding more organic matter back into the soil to increase that soil health. I appreciate you watching. Until next time, we'll see you later. Thanks for joining today.